can guard their language and so forth.
You got it streaming, John?
It's going up right now. Oop. All right, we're live.
All right, thanks, John. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me, Jim?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Chuck?
Right on. How you doing, bud?
Good,
Hey,
good.
guys. Jonathan, I want to thank you for that reminder for folks to tune in about 5 or 10 minutes early. Because on a personal note, I was 10 minutes late a couple meetings ago when I was logging on 5 minutes early. Because I just want to warn you, I've got Google and I did an update on my browser. And it would not let me in. It wouldn't recognize the little code to get into the meeting. And that's why I think you, Jonathan, you had sent me like a couple different invites and finally I was able to get in. That was all because of an update.
I'm glad it finally worked.
Yeah. I haven't had trouble since.
My daughter had the first day of virtual school today, and Zoom totally crashed on the whole class, so they didn't end up getting to do anything. So I think at least we're not alone in these issues we've had.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa. I don't think I've met you yet.
No, I don't think you have. This is the first time I have done more than just attend the meeting via the live stream.
All right. Glad to have you on with us.
Thank you.
welcome.
I'm excited.
Hi, Judy. How are you?
I am just fine. And you?
Good. Good to see you.
Thank you. Warm enough outside still.
Yeah.
Whew.
Oh, Mr. Pennell.
Hello, how's everybody doing?
Good.
How are you?
Good.
Missed you last week.
Yep.
That's part of sending kids off to college, isn't it?
Yes.
Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, how are you?
Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can now. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks for sending me the link. And Andy mentioned that you could show me how to share a document during
Yes,
this.
ma'am. It's pretty easy. So if you look at the bottom of the window that you have Zoom open in,
Yes.
several buttons: mute, stop video, security. Right in the middle, there's a green one that says share screen. And if you click that button, it'll bring a secondary screen up, and you can see all of your windows that you have open on your computer. And then all you need to do is just select the one that you want. And then,
Okay.
yep, and you just hit share. You're exactly right. If there's
Okay.
sound or video, there's two small buttons on the left side of that white screen that shows you all your different screens you could open. And you just need to click those if you have sound or video. But other than that, it's pretty simple.
Thank you.
Yep. If you have a challenge or anything happens when that time comes, I will help you then too.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Bob, let me congratulate you. I was reading your name on the original Downtown Improvement Group, and I was looking at the date there 30 years ago.
Good grief. Seems like 10. Really? It was 30 years. I had no idea.
1990, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it's gratifying that most things were implemented.
It's really amazing how it's worked out, actually.
Mhm.
Yep. Downtown was very rough at the time. Really rough.
Yeah, I saw the CSU student saying it looked terrible.
Yeah.
And that the town didn't realize how bad the town looked.
Yeah. We had, just as a matter of information, I guess I have a minute here. The downtown sidewalks were sandstone, and no two of the pieces of sandstone next to each other were ever on the same level. And the curbs were terrible. We had big greasy 55-gallon drums sitting in the sidewalks for the trash cans. It was so bad. No paint on most of the buildings, or little of it anyway. So it's changed a lot.
Sorry, Mike, you're on.
There's that mute button. We'll wait a couple more minutes for Art. I think Art's the only one that's not on right now of council. So we'll give a couple more minutes. Hello, Carmen. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Mayor.
Good evening.
That's okay.
Diane, you kind of sounded like Alfred Hitchcock when you said that.
That's who I meant to be.
Now just watch out for the birds.
They're all on my deck.
No, they're not.
I know some of the hummingbirds around here are dive bombers. You really got to watch yourself. You can hear them, but you can't see them, and all of a sudden they're on you.
Yeah, especially if you're wearing a red shirt.
I think some of them have left town because of the smoke.
Oh, yeah.
So you ready for this? I've heard from a couple of people that they think that they're getting a mice problem and they think it's because of the smoke. Were there any reality to that?
Well, we've had a mice problem for sure. We're catching them many nights. We have traps all over the place, in
Yeah,
and
same
out.
here.
Me
Yeah,
too.
same here. I'm thinking
Right.
Charlie's Place might be able to help folks out with cats.
Yeah,
More animals.
yeah. I don't know if the smoke has anything to do with it, but
I don't need any more animals. I've got the last one in junior and high school. I don't need any more animals.
that's a while ago too, Mike.
I have a mutant chipmunk up on Virginia Street.
Do you really?
Yeah, it's like 4 times the size of a regular chipmunk.
Wow.
I've got a yard full of something. There's holes all over, but I still don't know what they are.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. We do have voles up here. I guess we've never had a problem, but that might be it. I don't know.
Yeah, this.
All right, we're
holes
gonna
are-
go ahead. It's a little after 6. This is our work session on August 24th, 2020. So we've got a few items to discuss here and go over. So first, what we're gonna do, I haven't even met, but the person that we brought on to help us get through our audit, some finance things that we need to continue to get through. I believe it's Lorraine Trotter. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And I'm Mike Hillman. I'm the mayor. Glad to finally meet you and the rest of council's with us. So we're going to give the floor to you a little bit. Tell us how good a financial position we're in. We don't have anything to worry about, and the audit's going to go through without any hiccups.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And it's nice to see some of you again that I met a couple summers ago when I did a financial trend analysis. Yes, I'm Lorraine Trotter, and I'm helping out with, I specialize in governmental accounting and management, and I've been hired to kind of fill in here while you've got a vacancy. What I'd like to do is walk you through some reports that come off of the Cassell accounting system that the city has. It's a governmental accounting software. I've used many different accounting softwares, and I believe Cassell to be the best for cities and towns. And hopefully you'll see some information there that you find useful. I'm going to use the share screen, and so please holler out if it's too small or you can't me or you can't see it. But
Everyone, if you look in the top center of your screen when she does share it, you'll have an option to make your screen bigger. There's a little box you can pull down and it'll say fit to window or fill. View options, and then you can change zoom ratio.
so I believe I've shared it. Has everyone got access to it?
It's very good.
Okay. So this is a report that's called the official financial statement that comes out of your accounting system. And one of the things that I like about the Cassell software is that it allows you to use various bank accounts and pay bills for different departments out of them and keep track of which fund is getting the money or paying the money out, and keep track of whose money, how much of the combined checking and savings accounts are really owned by your various funds. So this is always the first page of that financial statement, and these statements are run through June 2020. I've just finished reconciling July, but I've got one or two things to look into. I like using June statements when you're looking at budgeting because it's so easy to think of half the year and what twice of that would be for the whole year. But on this first page is the combined cash statement, and it shows all these different bank accounts and savings accounts that the city has. The total $11 million and that are in the combined cash treatment in Cassell. And then down below, it shows which ones of these funds that the city has own the money in the combined cash. So you can see that the very bottom line that I highlighted is $6,907,000. It matches the amount allocated to other funds that's in the top portion of the page. And you'll see in that top portion of the page that $453,000 is not distributed amongst the funds because it's reserved for your restricted use. So all the rest is allocated to the various funds. And you can see, for instance, that your general fund owns $1.6 million worth of the $6.9 million that's in those combined cash accounts. All your funds have positive shares of the combined cash, except for your bottom two. The WCIP is a negative cash position. So it's owing money back to these other funds that would have more interest, for instance, if they had more money in that account. But that just gives you a quick look at how the cash is handled. And I highlighted that allocation to general fund of $1,615,000 because when you go to page 2, which is the balance sheet for the general fund, that's the first figure that appears on here. It shows the general fund has an asset of $1,615,000 from the combined cash fund. And I know that you've been receiving a monthly report, which Andy shared with me, that shows your cash balances. But I wanted to give you this balance sheet tonight because you can see that cash is just one of the items that's an asset for each of your funds. So you also have some petty cash, or the county treasurer has money that they need to fork over for money they collected on your behalf. And you have properties reasonable clear that are all assets of the city. But cash alone isn't the best indicator of your financial health because you have liabilities against that cash that have to be paid out. So in the general fund, you'll see that liability total is $212,000 out of the $2 million that you have in assets, only 1.6 of which is in cash. I say only, cash is king, and that's a good amount of cash to have in your general fund. So moving toward the bottom of that page, I highlighted the fund balance. And this will soon become your audited fund balance from the end of last year. Whatever appears on this balance sheet under the title of fund balance tells you what you started the year with. So the audit for 2019 isn't done yet, so there might be some changes to that. But as of now, it looks like the general fund started the year with $2 million in its fund balance. So far during the year, it's lost a little. It's had revenue over or under, in this case, expenditures of $147,000. So right now, at the end of June, according to those records so far, you've got a fund equity of $1,882,000. That's the cash and your other assets minus your liabilities. So you've got still a 1.882 as of June, the end of June. Going into the next page is where we'll start looking at revenues and expenditures. We're leaving the balance sheet and looking at the income statement. And here you'll see that I've highlighted like your top 10 revenues. So this report shows you, I guess it's not showing up in this PDF, but it does show up in Cassell. This first column is called year-to-date actual 2018. And then so that's 2 years ago actual through June. The next column is year-to-date actual 2019, last year through June. What you got in June is the period total. What your year-to-date actual is through June of this year, that's your budget for the whole year. So you've got 67.9% this year of your property taxes at the end of June. So your year-to-date actual is 122,000, you budgeted 180, you've got almost 70% of it through June. That amount, the year-to-date actual of 122.6, is greater than either of the previous 2 fiscal years. So I think this kind of can show you the trends of where you were, and with audited figures for 2018, final figures not yet audited for 2019, where you are halfway through this year. Your sales tax is, you're at 45.7% of what your budget is through the end of June. And I think that's a real telling line to look at there, the sales tax. It's 10003130 is the account number on the left. But it shows that in 2018, you had 570 grand at this point in the year, 627 last year, and 651 this year. So far, your sales taxes have not taken a hit from the virus or the lockdown. These June financial statements reflect what you've received so far, and the state has sent you by the beginning of June the taxes that it collected in May for sales through April. So we don't see what happened in April or May yet, but still you're looking better than you did each of the past 2 years. Use tax is lower than 2018, but kind of similar to prior years, and you're at 37% of your budget. If some of that is coming from building use, then a lot of that will come in the summer, we hope, but who knows. And franchise fees from public service company is one of your biggest revenues, and you're at 52% of what you budgeted so far, so that's coming in on as scheduled. Down below, one of your next biggest revenues is building permits, and you are lower than last year, but higher than the year before. So that activity can vary. You're only at 37.5% of what was budgeted. Generally, more will come in through the summer months than during the first 6 months of the year. Other taxes, you've got some other major revenues here from this marijuana sales tax that comes from the state, and from the state sources of road and county road and bridge, and the state highway users tax. So again, the marijuana sales tax is pretty much the same as it was the previous 2 years. The road and bridge is higher than it was the previous 2 years. And the highway users tax is just slightly lower, but kind of comparable to the previous 2 years.
Well, I'd like to make a comment on that. You know, the marijuana sales tax, where when we sat around and scratched our heads about how our sales tax didn't go down as much as we thought, and a couple of months even came up, we were saying that we felt that the marijuana and the alcohol in the grocery store were carrying us. But according to this document, it doesn't look like they were providing much more sales tax than they were in the previous 2 years. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
You know, to see that. It's kind of interesting.
I'm going to move on to the next page where your last 2 of the 10 biggest revenues are. Fines. Now, those are lower than the previous 2 years. That kind of figures with people not traveling as much. They're at 39.4%. And then your leases and rentals, I don't know yet too much about those. Maybe Andy has a comment on those, but they're at 35.7%.
Some of those will still be coming in later this year.
So the total fund revenue for the general fund, oops, I'm going to make sure you can see the column titles. Sorry about that. The through the end of June was $1,222,000. And you budgeted $2,250,000. So your total revenues are pretty close to 50% in the general fund. They are also they're higher through June than they were in either of the past 2 years. The next pages of this report show each department. Is there a question? Okay, the next 2 pages, several pages show each department separately. And I don't intend to walk through these, but you'll see that, it shows each of the line items that you've budgeted and similar information about what was spent the past 2 years, what you've gotten in June, what you've spent so far this year, and what percent of your budget you've spent so far. So on expenditures for the month, things that are the same every month, you'd expect those to be about 50%. Some things you pay right in the beginning of the year, like maybe your CIRSA insurance or something. There was no, if you look about 20 rows down, CIRSA, there was nothing in this period, but there's a year-to-date actual. So you can look at each of these as you're inclined. And I know your department heads and Andy will be looking at these in the budget process. But the streets expenditures is at about 41% of the budget. And just kind of glancing through, administrations at 58%, community promotion 45%. And you can just kind of see the activities here. Police at 44.9. And we get to the end, past it. And the total expenditures for the general fund through June are at 38.5% of what was budgeted. Now, probably some of the larger projects or big purchases haven't happened yet that may happen in the summer, but it's not like your expenditures are going crazy or outpacing what's been budgeted. You're at 38.5% of the budget. So in your budget, your revenues and expenditures were such that your expenditures were going to exceed your revenues. Your budget was balanced because you included a carryover, which is that general fund I showed you. And you had included a $1 million carryover to say, okay, we'll be balanced. But you actually started with a $2 million fund balance. So through the year to date, you've drawn down that fund balance by $147,000. And if that was your plan and you don't feel you need to worry about drawing that down because that's what it was there for in a time like this, then that's okay. If you want to expand that fund balance and make some, if you've got I think you do have policies about what your fund balance would be, how many years months or years of expenditures that it would cover. That's something to keep track of as you look at next year. And when you do your budget, you'll see the fund balance that's forecast after next year's expenditures and whether it's trending down or up. But if I go back to that page 2, which showed that general fund balance of 2 million, here's the minus 147 beneath it of this year's revenues over or under expenditures year to date. And again, your total fund equity at June was $1.8 million. $1.8 million, so keep that in mind. We're going to go back to page 17. And your, oops, I remembered wrong. Page 12. $1.8 million is what your fund balance is. Your total expenditures budgeted for the year were $3.5 million. So roughly twice that. In other words, your fund balance right now could get you through another half a year of expenditures, even if you had 0 revenues. So that's something to take some comfort in as you come into a year like this where you don't know what revenues are going to be or what the outcome is. Or even if you had a catastrophe like a flood or something that wiped out your revenue sources downtown, you could still through 6 months with zero revenue, zero emergency funds coming in from the feds or whatnot, zero insurance claims paid yet. You have enough for 6 months to handle that. Any questions on the general fund before I move on? Well, moving on, you have several other funds, I'm sure you're aware. Some of these are small little funds you won't spend much time on. You do handle a trust fund that's related to the cemetery. Then you also have your own cemetery fund for operations. And you had a fund balance of 100,000 at the end of 2019. You weren't really budgeting much in revenues or expenditures there for the year, so you'll probably have about the same fund balance going into 2021. Here's your ramp fund, Colorado Boulevard devolution. You've got the fund balance at the beginning of this year was $1,050,000. And you weren't expecting much revenues. That was that money already received, mostly back in 2018 or before.
What account do we have that money in, Lorraine?
Let me look. So back on page 1, this is Fund 20, and you have $1,041,000 in these various cash accounts. Some of them are investment like Color Trust or CSAFE. And
so it's spread out over the different accounts? It's
yes.
Not like all in money market account. It's spread out all over all these accounts?
I'm not sure where you put it, but yes, any money that goes into combined cash is kind of considered the same way. It may be earning money in the CSAFE, but you own a share of this and you're going to get any of the earnings from the CSAFE based on how much your share is, each fund.
Because I guess what I'm thinking is I thought maybe the interest boosted that account up, or Andy, do you know of any other expenses or bills that we owe to Colorado Boulevard?
Lorraine mentioned that 1 million fund balance was the beginning of the year. So yes, we did have additional expenses through May and June.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep, and you'll see on this balance sheet that your revenue over expenditures through the year so far has brought that $1 million down by 37,000. You do have some accounts payable that haven't been paid yet, so that cash will go out when those bills are paid. And here's your revenue is in the form of interest on investments, $1,200 so far this year. Here's some of your expenses, project management mostly so far this year, and you had some engineering earlier in the year. You have your improvement fund from the 1%, 2% sales tax. This is capital improvement fund. Again, it had a fund balance of 3.2 million at the beginning of the year, and you've added 143,000 to it so far.
And Lorraine, we actually split that out a couple of years ago. So we have 1% that goes to the improvement fund, 1% sales tax goes to the improvement fund, and 1% to the street tax, our street fund.
Okay. And this improvement fund, I remember talking about that a couple of years ago because of that separate bond election question. Okay. Sales and use tax, these are your two revenue sources here, and they are at 41 and 31%, similar to what we saw in the general fund. But sales tax still coming in higher than either of the previous 2 fiscal years. Expenses have been minimal so far this year. They're on this page. You're at 8.9%. The highlighted line on the bottom is your total expenditures for the year, 8.9% of budget. So more of that could be spent. And you've got a net income so far of 143,000. This next fund is the lottery proceeds that are limited to parks and certain recreation uses. 59,000, almost 60,000 in that fund at the beginning of the year. And you appear to be just saving that for a future project. So you're just showing each month, each quarter you get some of those lottery proceeds and interest on your investments, on the deposits, and no expenditures expected. So that's going along as planned. And here's your 1% street tax. It has 2.9 million in it as well at the beginning of the year, almost 3 million. Your revenues, pretty much the same story on the sales tax. Stronger this year than either of the past 2 years, but at about 43% of budget. You have a bond money here that we haven't seen anything come from yet. But you have gotten a grant of 378,000. And expenditures of 1.6 million so far this year, which is about half of the budget. So you're drawing down on that fund balance by 899,000. Planned expenditures. Now we're moving into your utility funds. Here's the water fund. Whoops. And these funds are accounted for like a business. So unlike the funds that we just looked at that are governmental funds, where we're just seeing how much taxes you bring in, what you spend it on, and how much is left, the fund balance. These, you really measure all of your equity and all of your infrastructure and your improvements. And suppose you sold your water system to some special district, you could, it's valued. You've got water rights and other improvements that are part of your assets. Those general fund, for instance, had no capital assets showing on its balance sheet. It was just the cash and receivables, et cetera. So here we're looking at net position, which is a little different. So there is a fund balance, but there's also contributed capital from tap fees. It has to be used for certain amounts. There's contributed capital grants, there's retained earnings, and there's income for the year, which results in a net equity of 4.9 million. But up above in those assets, minus depreciation, minus the amounts due on them to the Colorado Power Authority, Colorado Water and Power Development Authority, and other loans, there's over 3 million that's owed against that. I mean, that's totaled up in your assets. So if you take 3 million away from this total fund equity, you're closer to what your cash position would be, or your fund balances. Here in this water fund, fourth line down on the assets is the rate stabilization restricted cash. You may remember that was removed from the combined cash on that very first page. It can only be used for this fund. It's restricted to rate stabilization. When we get into the revenues and expenditures, your revenues for the year in water are right around 50%. Generally, what you'd expect to see in June, a little below half, because the hotter months follow June. You look at your expenditures. Sorry for the scanning. Total expenditures of 317,000 out of a budget of 1.7 million. So only about less than 20% of what you budgeted has been spent so far. So again, maybe there's capital projects that you had planned that haven't happened yet as of the end of June. There's also some debt service on those notes payable in the various loans that you probably pay once or twice a year that haven't been paid yet either. But again, so for this year, this fund has net revenue over expenditures of 689,000. The wastewater fund isn't quite so rosy. You do have a lot of assets here, and a lot of it's, almost all of it is in capital assets. When we go down to your revenues and expenditures, again, your revenues are what we would expect to see. And then the operations. For the year, you've spent 288,000 out of 1.2 million. Again, much less than what's budgeted, probably due to some debt service. And you also budgeted depreciation. That's going to be an expense of the fund, although you don't have to spend money on it. And maybe some capital projects. But I do notice that you have a stormwater fund that's not reported in your audit. I believe they combine this in with your wastewater fund in the audit. It has another 129,000 in its fund balance. No revenues expected, and one project that's been done so far this year. And then you have 2 different funds for capital improvement projects for each of your water and sewer operations. Those also get combined in your audit into either the water fund or the sewer fund, wastewater fund. So you've got 200,000 extra equity in the water fund CIP with no revenues expected, and $9,000 spent so far this year out of a budget of $250,000. Wastewater CIP, this is the one that's from the fund balance down to the waste picture. That fund balance is in the negative. So perhaps there's something that has happened in 2019 that will be, found out during the audit prep. Perhaps this is correct, perhaps it's not. Are you used to seeing negative numbers of this magnitude in this fund?
I wonder if that has to do something with our grants from DOLA.
Yep. And the auditor also, Lorraine, is proposing, will be proposing an intra-fund loan to cover the shortfall at the end of 2019 into 2020.
Well, that's good, because as far as all these statements go, this is really the only fund that's extremely troublesome as I look through your statements. There is the loan that has come in so far, 1.9 million, and the budget was 4 million. So I don't know if you'll be getting the rest or if that plan didn't pan out as expected.
Yes, we will be requesting the remainder of that $3 million loan. And then we just put in the request for the final amount for the $1 million DOLA grant. So yes, we will be getting that entire 4 million.
Okay, good. And then the wastewater CIP projects, you spent $1.5 million already this year on those. So your net revenue over expenditures is a positive 376,000. And if you get the rest of those grants and loans, then that'll be another, what, 2.5 million. So it may wipe out that deficit that we saw on the first page of this fund. The pension fund is just a trust fund you're associated with your police pension plan. It's not really your money, it's monies that have already been contributed to the pension. So that's the 51 pages at a glance, but I wanted to walk you through each of those funds so that you can be thinking in terms of the fund budgeting as you go forward. Each one has to be dealt with separately and have different restrictions and rules regarding them. But I feel from my viewpoint of knowing about governmental accounting and a little bit about the city 2 years ago, that it's not extremely worrisome. There's issues and you want to keep them in mind, but it didn't freak me out or make me feel like you've got a big hill to push rocks up.
We should all give ourselves a round of applause. Well, really, the department heads should. Well, and that was a question that I was going to ask. Was there something alarming to you that says, Idaho Springs, we need to sit down and figure this thing out? So it's good to hear that we do see one department that is a little off, but we think that with some of the revenues that we have coming in could offset that and put us in a pretty good position.
Right. I think you'll be wise to keep looking at a report like this every month, keep watching those major revenues, especially in the general fund, because they're the ones that vary the most and they're the ones that go toward your everyday operations. And just, tread lightly, but you don't need to be fearful at this point.
So going into the 2020 budget, Lorraine, what is something that you would tell the council for us to keep an eye on how we should start this budget, which is going to be much different than our past years? What is something that you could tell us that we should really concentrate or keep an eye on as we move forward with our 2020 budget?
Well, definitely you want to keep an eye on those revenues and see if they're realistic forecasts as you go forward. You also want to keep an eye on the political scene, if it's going to be continued to be locked down or if things are going to open up again, and see how that's going to portend for the city. You want to keep an eye on those capital projects. That's a lot of money, and you know how sometimes suddenly you can be confronted with a change order or work order that changes that picture. So your capital projects and your monthly revenues are the two main things I would pay close attention to. I know you've got a plan about needed improvements and you're working through it, and just evaluate the timing of that, if anything needs to be pushed or not, or accelerated even. But I think it's kind of normal budget type issues this year, aside from the lockdown question.
All right, council, is there any questions? I'm expecting one from either Art, if he's on with us, or Chuck.
Looks good.
I had trouble getting in, so I don't have questions. Is there somewhere I can review all this stuff?
Yeah.
Yes, we will get this out to you, to the council, this report.
So can I ask questions thereafter? If I
Yes.
have any? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'll
Okay.
let you off easy tonight, Mayor.
All right. Lorraine, thank you for coming in, and it's nice to meet you finally.
You too.
I think this information is going to be very beneficial as we move forward in our 2020 budget, and we'll keep an eye on it.
All right, thank you. Nice to see you all tonight. Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine.
All right, next we're going to move real quick. We've got about 20 minutes. We're going to move into project updates. We really didn't get a list of them, but we could go through them. So project updates.
I'm going to share it with you now, Mayor.
There you go. So Andy does have something prepared for us.
Let's see here. All right, sharing screens here. See how this works. No. What are you seeing now?
You got it.
Project updates.
That's it.
All right, so you've got it in front of you.
I'll let
Okay.
you run through this, Andy, since you can control the scroll.
Absolutely. So John, I clicked on it. I'm sharing it with you guys, but I'm not seeing it on my end. What do I need to do?
It's likely underneath your Zoom window, so you may need to move it to move your Zoom to your screen. So if you minimize this window that you've got up right now.
Okay, am I moving it now for all of you?
It's
No.
the same for us.
Here, let me come help.
Here I am, John.
Hang on a sec. So I'm getting used to sharing screens here. Let's see. So you guys are seeing it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Give me just a moment and we'll, John's going to show me how to see it on my end here.
Yeah, it's probably the top half, I imagine.
Okay, so I thought this was what I was sharing, John, right here, right?
Hit your stop share really quick. Okay, now do it again. And then you want to share.
Click here.
Mhm.
Yep.
And again.
Oh.
Now see how it's got a green box.
That's it.
Yes, sir.
The green box upstairs. All right. I did have it on my end, but I wasn't. All right. And is it now moving for you all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Scrolling up?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. All righty. This is a update on projects, and the first section here is projects completed. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but just this is a update of the list that you saw last year about this time. And it shows just the projects that have been completed, when they were completed, next steps, if any. In most cases, there are no next steps. And then the funding sources. And then the next section on page 3, which I'm turning to here, projects in progress. And this will be talking more as we work on the 2021 budget with council. Of course, we have
2021 budget. I'm sorry.
2021 budget. Yep. Hard to believe. I won't spend a lot of time on these, but I just want to, and I'll get this to you as well, so you can have a copy of this, each of you. But we'll be talking more about this as far as the what we want to look at for the 2021 budget and beyond. But just to give you a little update, of course, our big project is the wastewater treatment plant improvements. And we've pretty much finished up with project 1, and project 2 is underway, and shows the funding sources there on the right column. Next steps there, completion of the project in spring of 2021. Public Works Department, the design is basically completed. The architectural and engineering design for that project. We will be coming back to council to ask if we can submit a $1 million grant to DOLA. It's due October 1st of 2020. So it's coming up pretty quick. And if we are fortunate to get the $1 million DOLA grant, and if we feel as a city, working with Lorraine, that we have sufficient funds to pay the balance of the cost of the project, which could be $2 billion plus, $2 to $2.25 million, then I think we can move forward with that project next year. But certainly there are a lot of unknowns right now. Any questions so far? I don't want to be going too fast. Police department, as you know, our plan is, the plan has been for a number of years, is to relocate our police department from their current location to the building that the city owns, where the fire department is currently located. And then the fire department would move to a new facility up on Highway 103 near the ambulance facility across from the old high school. And with that project, it mainly would involve renovations to the fire station. And I don't see those being hugely costly, but we may be eligible for a DOLA grant application there, and then using the improvement fund as well. But of course, we can't move the police department until the fire department relocates, so that could be a couple of years off. Downtown parking deck, that continues to be considered and discussed. There's been some work done so far. You can see in that second column over the last several years. Most current activity is meeting with the Downtown Improvements Work Group on a weekly basis to try to drill down on a funding plan for this project, which may be about $6 million. And we already have a commitment from CDOT towards this project. And now we just need to figure out how to fund the remainder of the project. And this is the parking deck that's being proposed behind Tommy Knockers on the property that the city owns. Mayor, did you want to add anything else on that particular point?
No, you were good.
Okay. Virginia Canyon Mountain Park, of course, we've had a lot of discussion about getting some trails constructed. Most recently, as you know, we submitted a GOCO resiliency grant application this month, and we're waiting to hear back on that. That is a special funding opportunity that was offered by GOCO due to COVID-19. And we're expecting to hear back whether or not we got that grant by early to mid-September. So, and then we also are looking at a Colorado Parks and Wildlife grant application that is due this fall to also help fund construction of some trails. So we're trying to get funding, grant funding from GOCO and CPW. And as you also know, we have the option, and it's up to council to exercise this option, is to use Argo gondola fees that are advanced to the city to help expedite the construction of some of these trails. City Hall restroom renovations, those were scheduled to be done this year, but of course, along with a lot of other projects and expenses, that project was deferred. And but if things gradually improve, that project is designed. We would like to try to bid that this winter, but of course that's a budget discussion that we'll talk more about later in the early fall. The funding there is proposed from the improvement fund. We've also had plans for a long time, for probably at least 5 years, to do some more rehabilitation here at City Hall, a historic building. The windows are in very bad shape, and also there's some other exterior work that needs to be done. And again, if we if we feel we can do it financially, we'd like to bid the project this winter and get that work done next year. There may be an opportunity to get some funding from the State Historic Fund for that part of the City Hall work. Downtown Improvements Master Plan, that was another project that was proposed for this year, but that was deferred. And an RFP was created, but we just didn't pull the trigger on hiring a consultant to get that work done. So again, we'd like to try to get that accomplished next year. And this would be looking at, exactly what capital improvements do we want to do downtown, what needs to be done, what the timing is, what the funding would be. Another project that's a big deal for our city is the affordable housing project, Riverbend Residences, that is under construction. In fact, the smaller building, which I believe is 6 or 8 units, that has already opened up. That is already, they have their certificate of occupancy. So we'll start seeing residents moving in there in the near future. But the bigger building is expected to be completed in early 2021, spring of 2021. And this is a private developer using Colorado Housing Financing Authority tax increment financing. So although it's not a city project, it is really important to the city to provide some income restricted housing for people who live and work here in the city. Several other projects that aren't city projects, but they impact the city heavily. We all know about the westbound peak period shoulder lane project from Veterans Memorial Tunnels to Empire. That's well into construction right now. They expect to be completed construction late fall, and then it'll be operational. The managed lane going westbound will be operational by spring of 2021. And that's because they have to do a lot of testing of it. Clear Creek Greenway, as you know, the city has been fortunate with grants to be able to build and build out about 2 miles of greenway through the city. And then CDOT will be building the rest of the greenway through the city, the other 2 miles, about 1.5 miles. So we'll have when we're all said and done here with CDOT's contribution with the greenway, we'll have a greenway from one end of the city to the other. So about 4 miles of greenway, which is pretty exciting. And so you've got 2 segments of the greenway that are listed there that are expected to be constructed starting next year by CDOT. And then there'll also be some reconstruction on East Idaho Springs Road down near the wastewater treatment plant. That will include the greenway, which will be adjacent to the road for part of the way there. And then it'll also include paving that one segment there by the horseshoe turn, horseshoe bend. that will be paved. So that's the other part of this project, and that's quite a big project with some of the challenges in that area. Water Wheel Park, we still have some punch list items we've been after CDOT to make good on with some of the landscaping and the irrigation there. So we haven't forgotten about that. Still trying to get that done. The last we heard from CDOT is that they might include that work, paying for that work out of the westbound peak period shoulder lane project. So we're going to keep on them about that. A couple other projects. It's still our goal to get the train right here at City Hall, get that restored. We did receive a couple proposals for restoration, and it's still our intent, perhaps next year, maybe next spring, to submit a grant to the State Historic Fund to try to help us get that train restored. It desperately needs to be restored. There's some damage being done to it because of the condition it's in right now. Sites of facilities plan that was approved by City Council in January of this year. There's a whole list of historic sites that the city owns, and there's a plan to restore them over the next upcoming years. So we'll be using a combination of the improvement fund and maybe in some cases state historic funds to get some of our sites and facilities gradually restored and improved. The last item here is Macy Ruth Mill Park. A few years ago, we did purchase we did install replacement playground equipment there. And we've also talked possibly about acquiring some additional property there to expand that park. One funding source there might be the Conservation Trust Fund or the Improvement Fund. And then I know we're running short on time, so there are just a few other projects that are listed here that have been done in the past, just for your reference. So that's just a quick overview of on the status of projects. Any questions on the project updates?
Can we get a copy of that sent to us, Andy?
Yes, I will.
Hey, can
Thank
you
you.
tell me what did CDOT for the parking deck give us a commitment of money and how much?
Do you want to speak to that, Mayor?
Well, the promise has been 2 million. I'm going to push them to try to get 2.5 million. But
Okay.
what they had earmarked for us was $2 million.
Okay. Thank you.
All
What
right.
about the Habitat? Mayor, what about the Habitat for Humanity project? Did that?
Was that on your list? Andy?
That's a good question, Jim. That probably should be added to the list. It's not a city project, but it's a nonprofit, Habitat for Humanity, that is providing affordable housing for single-parent families. So that project, the status of that project is that they have had their community meeting, which is required before they actually submit their proposal or for review to the city, and then they also needed to get a variance for a setback variance, and that was approved as well. So that variance happened, was approved by the variance board. And so now it's at a point, and they've also removed the 2 mobile homes that were on that site. And so now the city is just waiting for those, for the formal submittal for that project.
Yeah, I noticed they were, looked like they were starting to do stuff and move around, and I didn't know the status of that one. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
All right. Anybody else, group? Okay, with that, we've got just a few more minutes because I want to give everybody a little 3-minute break in between. Andy, give us an update on our 2021 budget calendar, please.
I'll make this real quick, Mayor. Can you all see the budget schedule?
Yep, you'll have to scroll it though.
Great. Okay, this will be real quick. I just wanted to give you all a glimpse of what's coming up in the annual process to prepare the next year budget. Of course, we're at today with the financial update. And this week we'll be getting to the department heads their worksheets to prepare their budget requests for 2021. And then it's been the practice in recent years for The mayor and I and our finance officer, or in this case, it may be Lorraine, to meet with the department heads and go over their budget requests. So we'll be doing that in early September. Somewhere between now and the end of September, we'll be meeting with our auditor to go over the 2019 audit. So that'll be coming up. And then we'll have work sessions once we've met with the department heads on the budget requests, and we will then bring those requests to City Council. And we typically have at least a couple work sessions. So these are scheduled for September 28th, October 5th. And then by the 15th, October 15th, we should have a good working draft of the budget and a proposed budget that we'll submit to council. City clerk will then publish the required notice of budget in the Clear Creek Current. And then we can have another follow-up work session if we need it on the budget. Then we have our budget hearing. And then to finish it all off on December 14th, which is our last council meeting typically of the year, we'll have the resolutions to adopt the final budget and also certify our mill levy. And that's it, unless there are any questions. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what's coming up in the budget preparation process.
All right, any questions, council?
Oh, thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Andy.
Send the schedule out to everybody, Andy, so we have it, please.
I will do that.
All right. Okay, council, let's take a little 3 or 4 minute break, get here a little after 7, so we get started on our regular meeting. Thank you.
All right. What you?
That's more stuff. Okay,
So one project that Andy didn't mention is our hydroelectric project. That I would like to be working on to get some electricity to our water plant, pay for all the electric over there. All right, council, we'll get back in. It's our regular meeting, August 24th, 2020. It is 7:03. Thanks for being here tonight. Can I have roll call, please?
Michael Hillman,
Here.
Scott Pennell,
Here.
Chuck Harmon,
Here.
Bob Boland,
Here.
John Curtis,
Here.
Art Cacavelli, Jim Clark.
Here.
All right, please stand with us for the pledge of the allegiance. I pledge the
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. We have an agenda in front of us tonight. I'm not aware of any amendments to it. So can I have a motion, please?
I would move that we approve the agenda for the August 24th, 2020 meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I believe Bob Boland has second. Discussion. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Anybody feel they have a conflict of interest tonight?
I do, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Bob, I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay, I'll go first. Yes, on item 12 on the resolutions, I need to recuse myself on that.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Sorry, Jim.
Jim?
Thank you. I need to recuse on Allied bills this month.
Okay. And we're familiar with how to do that. We'll approve all the bills with Jim's vote, and then we'll just approve the Allied bill with the rest of us. All right, very good. Minutes, do I have a motion?
I'd move to approve the minutes from August 10th, 2020 and August 17th, 2020.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I believe Art was second. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes? Is there anything that we need to correct or identify in it?
They look good.
All right, hearing none. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 All right, anybody opposed? Very good. Let's move down to our bills. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I would move to approve the bills except for Allied Towing to August 24th, 2020.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All right, Art second. Discussion. Does anybody have any questions that we need to get clarified on the bills?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Art.
I assume the $500,000 transfer to Evergreen National Bank is to cover expenditures.
Payroll.
Yeah, that
Payroll. And
payroll.
my second part is, did you get my account number correct when you transferred the money?
No, we use mine.
All right, just thought I'd ask. All right, thank you.
So what that is, Art, is back when Sandy was with us, she set it up that she would do transfers of $500,000 to cover payroll expenses.
Okay.
So that's what that is. It's just
All right, thank you.
transfer to another account to cover payroll.
All right.
All right, anybody else? Hearing none, can I have roll call?
Michael Hillman,
Yes.
Scott Pennell,
Yes.
Chuck Harmon,
Yes.
Bob Boland,
Yes.
John Curtis,
Yes.
Art Cacavelli,
Yes.
Jim Clark.
Yes.
All right, and I'll make the motion to approve the bill to August 24th for Allied Towing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Scott Pennell is a second. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Michael Hillman,
Yes.
Scott Pennell,
Yes.
Chuck Harmon,
Yes.
Bob Boland,
Yes.
John Curtis,
Yes.
Art Cacavelli.
Yes.
All right. Diane or John, do we have any unscheduled public comment for tonight?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. We'll move down to public comment. What we have under here is, as council knows, we have some openings on some of our boards and commissions. We have had some letters of interest giving to us. It looks like most everybody is on tonight. We'll just hear a little piece from them real quick on who they are, where they reside, and why they want to serve on one of these boards and commissions. So let's start out with the variance board. Drew Van Doren, we know you. You come into our meetings and cause trouble all the time. So it's nice to see your name on an interest in one of our boards. So introduce yourself, Drew, and kind of explain and talk about why you'd like to serve on the variance board.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
You're fine.
You're good.
I apologize for coming in late. I had a bit of a work crisis. So I am interested in participating in local government fully. My last government position was as a member of the Women's Commission in the city of Fort Collins, and I served there for 2 years prior to moving to Idaho Springs. And I did just invest in Idaho Springs financially with a residence. And so I think it's time for me to really put down a few more roots. I have served on the Friends of the Library board for almost 2 years now, but now that I've sold my house in Fort Collins in the last month, I'm ready to take on a little bit more here. I have been a realtor for 16 years, and prior to that was a commercial and residential property manager for several more years with large shopping centers, small shopping centers, and all sorts of historical single-family homes around the Old Town Fort Collins area, as well as larger apartment communities. So I have some experience with variance requests, and when I asked Diane which commission might best use my skills, she suggested variances, so that's why I submitted a letter of interest.
All right, thank you very much for the recap and your explaining to us. You're the only one that actually is asked to be on the variance board. So it looks like it's going to be pretty simple. We still have to do a motion. So do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve Drew Van Doren to the Variance Board of Adjustments for a 4-year term as a regular member.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All right. Any more discussion or questions for Drew?
Welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. We'll just do a quick roll call, please.
Michael Hillman,
Yes.
Scott Pennell,
Yes.
Chuck Harmon,
Yes.
Bob Boland,
Yes.
John Curtis,
Yes.
Art Cacavelli,
Yes.
Jim Clark.
Yes.
All right.
Hey.
Drew, welcome aboard our variance board. Looking forward to bringing things to that board. And again, we're glad to have you on and participating as a member of our community and partnering with the City of Idaho Springs.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting more involved.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move down to another position we have on one of our commissions for the HPRC, the Historic Preservation Review Commission. Lisa Manifold is the only one that put in for this. And Lisa, you still with us?
I am.
There she is. Introduce yourself, Lisa, what you do and why you would like to be on our HPRC.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lisa Manifold. I live on Wall Street. We've had the house here for almost 8 years. And when we first moved to Colorado, almost 16 years ago, one of the things that my husband and I did was look immediately for where we could come and buy another home because we love the high country. And Idaho Springs was where we chose because we love the historic aspect of it. We're both from Annapolis on the East Coast, and I lived in the historic district, and I love living in a historic district. So when I saw this, one of the things that I believe in a lot like Drew is if you live in a community, the way to keep the community working for the people that live and work there, as well as the people that come to visit, is that you volunteer and you get involved. I have been a small business owner on and off for the last 20 years. So I understand working with both historic aspects and regulations so that you can, make a living. But what I really love about Idaho Springs is the commitment to the historic aspect, and how do you make that work moving into the 21st century? I mean, I think there are challenges to it, not only when you live and work here, but also for all the people that come here. When you were looking at the finances in the last work session, I was surprised to see that our revenue hadn't fallen, which means that people love to come here, and they love to come here because it's a city that embraces both the past and the present. So when I saw the notice, I immediately sent a letter to Diane, and she said, I think you'd be great on the Historic Commission. So that's why I applied for it.
All right, thanks, Lisa. You are the only one that's asked to be on this commission, so it looks like it's going to be pretty easy. Does any of council have any questions they'd like to ask Lisa?
I'm here, bring it.
So just to let you know, one of our council members ditched that seat, gave up the seat. He felt that Chuck Harmon kind of did his own analysis on it. And he really felt that, with things going to HPRC and recommendations being made to the council, that he felt that it was a conflict of interest and he wanted to step down on that, probably a year and a half ago, I personally asked Chuck to be on that board. So to move him from that board to council, I'm thrilled about it. But I know that he was very committed to the HPRC, had great input, and we're looking, and I feel that you'll bring something to that table. So
I hope so.
We're glad that you're interested.
And Mayor, if I could add another qualifier on there with stepping down, and that was the fact that we actually have had an outstanding alternate, and she had all of the same training, went to all of the meetings, so it just would not have made sense for me to have that conflict when we had such an outstanding alternate in place. And I was on that board about 10 years ago at one other time. Maybe it's, I think it was about 10 years ago. And Lisa, I'm just saying, you're going to love it if you're historically minded, as you were just mentioning. I think you're just going to really have a good time on that. There's excellent training for that too.
Oh, I'm excited.
And I think that the rest of the commission that's on there, we've got some very diverse people, but also some very experienced historic architects on that commission. So I think you'll learn a lot. I think it'll be great. And some great people on there.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I would move that we approve Lisa Manifold to the Historic Preservation Review Commission for a 4-year term as an alternate.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion, last chance for discussion. Roll call.
Michael Hellman,
Yes.
Scott Pennell,
Yes.
Chuck Harmon,
Yes.
Bob Boland,
Yes.
John Curtis,
Yes.
Art Cacavelli,
Yes.
Jim Clark.
Yes.
All right. Welcome
Thanks, Lisa.
aboard. Lisa.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
Okay, great. So the last commission that we are going to look at is our planning commission. As you know, Bill Mayer had resigned from that position for moving out of our city, served many, many years on the planning commission, other capacities of our city. So we've lost Bill to that. Sorry about that. One downfall to doing it at home for virtual meetings. So we have 2 people that have put in interest for this position. We'll hear a little bit from both of them. We've got Judy Murphy and Tracy Stokes. So what I'd like to do is just let Judy have just a second of why she would like to be on this planning commission and what she brings to the table for us. Judy?
Had to unmute. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I've lived in Idaho Springs for 15 years in a few different places. And even before that, was involved in Idaho Springs through the church, through Zion Lutheran Church. I've been a Realtor in Illinois, and I also worked for an architect for about 8 years as their office manager. I've done a lot of reading very recently about city planning and the best ways to build a city. And I love Idaho Springs. I'm born and raised in small towns and farms. So this is just an extension of the life I love. And I want to see Idaho Springs grow, but I want to see it grow better. Oh, and I live on Pine Slope, right next to Art Taco Bell.
Don't hold that against you.
Oh, gee, thanks.
Thanks, Mayor.
Art said you're a great neighbor. He was just a little concerned on how he was as a neighbor.
I'll tell you what, I couldn't ask for better.
All right, thanks for that, Judy. Does anybody have any questions for Judy before we hear from Tracy? All right, next we have Tracy Stokes. Tracy, would you like to say some things to the council?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I appreciate this opportunity to address. I've lived in Idaho Springs since 2012 and was privileged to be the general manager for the Argo Mill in my early career here. I switched to become a real estate broker. I'm currently employed as a real estate broker with Lux Front Range Real Estate. I live on the west end of town and I'm a huge history lover myself. I launched Idaho Springs walking tours last year. This year I closed as a result of virus, but planning on reopening the business next year. My office is located in the Historic Society building. I love to serve. I enjoy my time, my 4 years on council. I've developed strong relationships with many of the council people as well as the city employees, and I loved my time. I'm still serving and enjoy serving the community. I work on the Christmas committee, and you've had updates from me on our economic task force, which I also participate in. Looking forward to trying to develop plans for the community for a safe and healthy Christmas and all the activities therein. I would really appreciate being considered for the opportunity to serve the city again on Planning Commission. I had extensive training at the Colorado Municipal League conference a couple of years ago. I was sponsored by the city to attend that, and recently, just before came off of council, enjoyed a wonderful Department of Local Affairs ADOLA conference and training for Planning Commission in December of 2019, and look forward to additional training as it becomes available.
All right, thanks, Tracy. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Tracy?
Well, I don't know about asking questions, and my comments are not to be construed as disrespectful or rude. Do we get to kind of just make our comments in general about the applicants?
Sure.
Okay, I'm a little concerned with one applicant because of her experience and current activity as a real estate person. I believe that would cause some conflict of interest with all the projects that we've talked about that may be coming forward in the next year or two. And that concerns me. Also, she had a very good run on the city council as well, but I'm concerned that the residents of the community may consider this a gift to her for that particular reason. And I think we do need some fresh outlook in this city as well. And so with that in mind, those are my comments. I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful to anyone. Not my intention, but I need to make those comments.
Okay, thank you, Art. Would anybody else like to make comments before we make a motion?
Mayor, could I address one of the comments?
I don't think I want to get into a discussion and addressing comments on this. So does anybody else have anything that they would like to discuss?
Mayor, is this just for an alternate position so they fill in when someone's absent? Is that how that works with the alternate?
That is correct. I think, I'm sure that they would have some input in planning commission meetings, but as a voting member, they would not be a voting member.
It is an alternate position.
But they would step up when the position opened, correct?
Well,
I mean, that's the way we changed the policy, do we not?
Well, no, that's the way the policy has always been. That's what we had done over the, I guess, from the time planning, is if an alternate is there, that they wouldn't be moved up into the open seat.
Okay, I thought we had discussion to confirm that the last time we spoke about it, but okay.
Already a policy, we just left it because we talked about doing, getting statements and qualifications if we should go that way. And I think everybody felt that, people that sat on as an alternate for so long and has the interest and the desire to be on that as a permanent chair, a permanent position, that we would just continue the way we always did it.
Okay.
And Mayor, if I may, I think you all, Councilor Cacavelli's memory is correct. I believe you all adopted an ordinance that did codify that longstanding practice of taking the most senior alternate and bumping that person up, as it were, when there's a vacancy. So I believe Councilor Cacavelli is correct. That's now in the code, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know we discussed it. I didn't know that we took formal action on it, but
we did. I don't remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember that.
I should also point out that if Jordan Hudson chooses, he would be the next in line to become a regular member.
so this is alternate 2.
Yes.
And then Mayor, if I could just a general comment, I think number one, it's great that we have more than one interested party. And the second thing is that it's very difficult because I think both of these individuals have a really strong sense of our community. And that's going to make it really hard for anyone. I'm just looking at qualifications myself because I think both would be outstanding alternates.
All right, thank you, Chuck. Anybody else?
I'd like to echo Chuck's comments. I think it's great that we have concerned citizens stepping forward. I think we got 2 very good applicants. I do have a question for Carmen, since Judy does live in Pine Slope. If a developer came forward, could he say that that's a conflict of interest when somebody lives in a area that's under review like that?
Certainly always someone can say that or allege that. And certainly if any member of the planning commission or council are among a couple of groups that would lead to a conflict of interest, mayor and council, and to Councilor Pennell's question, what about folks who live in an area of a proposed development? Because that's a very different issue than someone who, say, as we have later on the agenda, Mr. Boland, Councilor Boland is going to recuse because of the potential business ownership or financial interest he may have in an eventual development. Being an applicant or someone financially interested is one thing. What about being a neighbor or someone who lives nearby? And that's a very fact-specific inquiry most of the time to determine if that person has a real legal conflict of interest. I will say, as a general rule, neighbors or people who are just in the area aren't per se automatically conflicted from voting or considering on a matter, unless potentially that person lives close enough that he or she would have legal standing to appeal a decision, right? That's kind of then you have skin in the game, then you're a party in interest under the law. And how we usually determine that is looking at whether that neighbor gets individualized notice of a hearing. Those folks who are close enough to get a mailed notice of the hearing are generally folks who have legal standing to appeal. And so if Ms. Murphy or anybody else in any situation were in that situation where they had legal standing to be an appealing party, I would advise that person to recuse, to protect the integrity of the decision of the whole group. So good question. It's rather theoretical, but given where she lives, I understand the question and the considerations. So that's how we would examine that. Does that help?
Yeah, I kind of felt that what you're saying it might be true, but
Okay.
thanks for your explanation.
Sure.
Okay, last.
Carmen,
Jim?
Carmen,
Yeah.
would this be any different than the other applicant working for the Argo or like previously or now?
It would. Any individual, again, who has, when we look at the issue of a conflict of interest, the first question, again, is generally, can that person financially, truly, materially benefit potentially from a vote, his or her vote? And let's say it were a situation where someone represented an applicant or developer in the past. Well, I think usually that's an issue that's in the past and arguably would not lead to financial benefit going forward. However, once again, as is always the case, Mayor and Council, you know, we've talked about these issues in training sessions before. There are legal conflicts of interest that require people to step down and say, I can't do this. And then there's the issue of perception and allegation of bias, which often comes down to a judgment call for all of you as officials. Sometimes it merely just looks too bad, to be blunt, and you're not comfortable because of what the perception may be of you already being on someone's side, right? So perhaps, Councilor Clark, what you describe is more, I think, off the cuff, an issue of potentially perceived bias. And that is, again, something we'd look at case by case and determine if it truly requires recusal or if it's a judgment call based on the comfort level of that individual.
Thank you, Carmen.
You bet.
Thanks, Carmen. Jim? Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion.
I would move to approve.
Wait a minute.
Sorry, I was moving to approve Tracy Stokes to the Planning Commission to a 4-year term as an alternate.
Do I have a second?
I didn't mean to step on you.
No, that's all right. Second.
Okay, Bob, second, first and second. Last chance for discussion. And I have roll
Can
call.
I move to approve Judy Murphy to the Planning Commission to a 4-year term as an alternate?
Carmen? No, you can't.
Yeah, you've got a motion that's been seconded that's live on the table, Mayor.
Okay.
You dispose of this one first.
I've never had this happen.
Mayor, you're on mute.
Second on the table. Last chance for discussion.
So the way this works is not a vote. It's we nominate one person, it either passes or fails. And if that doesn't pass, then we move to the second person. Is that how it takes place?
That is correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carmen. Nope.
No, you've got a motion to appoint, I believe, correct?
You got a person and a second. We'll take a vote.
Yes, sir.
And it'll be either accepted or denied, depending on the majority of the vote.
Yep.
Can I have roll call, please?
Michael Hillman,
Yes.
Scott Pennell,
Yes.
Chuck Harmon,
Yes.
Bob Olin,
Yes.
John Curtis,
Yes.
Art Cacavelli,
No.
Jim Clark.
Nope.
Okay, motion passes 5-2. Tracy will be our new alternate on our planning commission. I'd like to thank both of you ladies that showed the interest to be on our boards and commissions in the city I'm sure there'll be another opportunity at some point. So keep your ear to the ground and continue to be with us on these meetings and informed and know what's going on in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your consideration.
Thank you, Judy. Thanks
Yep,
for your
thank you.
input to the city and everything you do for us.
And Judy, I would also like to add that I too share your thoughts of responsible growth in the future, and I really have appreciated your voice over the last couple of years.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, let's move on. We are going to move down. I'm not going to let our city attorney say anything tonight. So we'll move down to the resolutions. And do I have them right now?
I will leave at this point.
To leave for a few minutes?
And Mayor, while Councilor Boland excuses himself, let me just remind you, don't have to do anything fancy, but do open a public hearing before you invite the applicant to speak. And Diane, if you could swear folks in, that would be great.
Ew. Well, I did not get a spiel for this.
I know, that's why I wanted to assure you that if you just say, Mayor and Council, or myself and Council, it is now 7:35, I'm opening the public hearing, et cetera, et cetera. Take it away.
Okay, it is 7:34. We are going to open a public hearing. This is a hearing that comes before the City Council of Idaho Springs. We will have an order. First, we hear testimony from staff. Then we will hear testimony from the applicant. And then we will hear any questions or testimony from the public. I almost have this thing memorized, don't I?
See, you're good.
I've taught you well.
As of now, it is 7:35. I declare this hearing now open, and we will start out with staff testimony, please.
And Mayor and Council, I don't believe that staff has any formal presentation. I believe the applicant does.
Okay.
Unless there are questions for staff, which we will be happy to answer as we proceed, I would just say I would invite you, Mayor, to invite the applicant to give their presentation.
Okay. So with that, we'll go to the applicant, and we'll have Diane swear in the applicant before testimony is given.
Mary Jane, are you the applicant?
Mary Jane and I will both be the applicants tonight.
Mary Jane's on mute.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what I was saying, Brian.
You could both raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Okay. We're here to hear your testimony.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, and thanks again for accommodating us with a Zoom council hearing tonight. We'll all be happy to get back in person and look everybody in the eye here, but just want to thank you for your support of the Mighty Auger project to date, and just want to take a few minutes to briefly address some concerns that were raised during last week's work session. So the purpose of the Mighty Argo Cable Car Metro District is to raise capital to pay for eligible public improvements specific to the Argo project. These public improvements were included in the public improvement agreement budget this council approved in June. And due to the steep terrain and environmental issues that come along with a Superfund site development project, it will require mitigation that are extra costs to project viability. Approval of this service plan will allow us to move forward with the execution of the uses anticipated and approved in the plan development zoning, as well as a final development plan for the Mighty Argo Cable Car. The Metro District impacts only the Argo property, and the city has no associated risk. Metro districts are very common throughout Colorado. At the work session last week, concerns were raised about property tax increases and potential impact to small business owners within the project. It's important to note that none of our tenants will own the property. They'll be leaseholders. We're obligated to disclose the proposed tax structure and estimated taxes, along with any other fees created by the Metro District that our tenants will incur in their leases. So it's fully disclosed to the tenants up front what the tax structure will be going forward, along with the public improvement fee. We appreciate the council's consideration of this important document tonight. My team is here to answer any remaining questions that you might have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bill Ankley, who will walk you through his PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. And I guess, Jonathan, if you're able to
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
share screen with Bill.
He should be able to.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Bill Ankley, and I'm with White Bear, Ankley, Tanaka, and Waldron, and we have assisted the applicant in the preparation of the Mighty Argo Metro District Service Plan, which is before you tonight with a resolution that, should you be so inclined, would approve the service plan as submitted for the Mighty Argo Metro District numbers 1 through 3. As you know, we had our work session last week and ran through some basics about Metro Districts, Metro District 101, if you will. And as part of that, we had a number of questions that were discussed at that time. We didn't have quite as much time to go through the specifics of the Mighty Argo service plan, although we did spend a few minutes going through the high points of that. So we thought it might be appropriate as a point of departure to run through the back half of that PowerPoint that we presented last time, which is also in your meeting packet. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully everybody will be able to see that. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So as far as the PowerPoint is concerned, we'll start with page 1. We have our service plan that has been submitted and has been reviewed by staff as well as by the Planning Commission. It's forwarded to you for further action. It's based on an approved service plan that you had used previously. I wanted to point out that, again, we're not looking for a land use approval here. This is a tool, a financing tool that would be available for the project to provide a source of low-cost, tax-exempt municipal financing to support the project in the form that it is approved by the city council. So there is no separation, or there is separation between the service plan and land use approvals. This is simply a resource that's available for the land use approvals when they are finally in place. The organization would occur if we proceed from this point at a November 3rd, 2020 election. We've proposed a triple district structure, which is not uncommon in Colorado. So we have an administrative district, which, as I described last week, is the face of the Metro District, and it's the entity with whom all outside parties would interact. The other 2 districts would be used for future development within the project to support bonds that would be issued to finance public infrastructure. And as Brian indicated, the city is not responsible for any of the debt or the taxes that these districts would impose. So it's only the property within the Metro districts that would be subject to the taxes. Again, here's our bird's eye view of the 2 areas that would be subject to the Metro districts. One is the upper landing site for the project, and the other is the lower landing depicted here. This is an exhibit that is in the service plan. Here's a detail on the lower landing, nothing particular to add to this, just a blow up of a close up rather of the lower landing. And then here's a close up of the upper landing. So some key elements of the service plan. As provided in the service plan, we have the full range of powers that are available to Metro districts in Colorado, which primarily consists of streets, water, sanitation, transportation, park and rec improvements. Those are the major players in terms of public infrastructure improvements. There are certain exclusions for powers that we're not allowed to undertake, including specifically fire, television relay and translator improvements. Those are excluded because they're provided by other entities. Estimated total public improvement cost, $18,500,000. We have a total debt issuance cap of $35 million in the service plan. It's typical to have a debt cap in the service plan. It's also typical to have a cushion in that debt cap to allow for contingencies such as cost increases, reserve requirements where they might be necessary in connection with the issuance of bonds, capital reserves, and that sort of thing going forward. So we always build a cushion in to the debt issuance cap. The real important number, though, is this maximum debt levy of 50 mils. As I described last time, that's your real governor on the amount of debt that the metro districts can impose, because when you market bonds, they will be marketed with a maximum mill levy cap of 50 mils. And the bond market will only loan that amount of money that they believe the metro district can pay back based on existing development and their assessment of future development opportunity within that mill levy cap. So that really defines the maximum amount of debt that can be issued at any given time. And it also represents the maximum mill levy that any property taxpayer within the boundaries of the district would be obligated to pay. And that's evolved over the course of time as a protection for property owners and taxpayers so that they're not exposed to the risk of unreasonable mill levies. You'll see a 50 mil cap in most special district service plans in the state. As far as operations and maintenance, to the extent that there are improvements that the city does not take for operations and maintenance, then the service plan allows the metro districts to own, operate, and maintain those improvements. In order to do so, we need to have a revenue stream available for that purpose. And so we haven't proposed a cap on that mill levy on the theory that if the district has improvements that it needs to maintain, it really needs to have the financial wherewithal to be able to raise revenue to properly maintain those improvements so they don't fall into a state of disrepair. Let me back up for a second. I hit that too quickly. We do have the ability under statute to impose fees for services provided if and when that would become necessary. We also have a maximum term of the bonds of 40 years for any property that might be developed for residential use. The capital plan, this is another exhibit from the service plan. This shows a little bit of detail on the capital improvements budget, showing phase 1 up here and phase 2 down below. These numbers were produced by the development team based on their design for the project. The final cost associated for public improvements will be a function of what the development approvals that the city ultimately provides for the project, which will include public improvements, some of which I think, as Brian indicated, have already been described in prior presentations. But the grand total, again, $18,508,000 is the current projected cost of public infrastructure. What are the revenue streams? We have 3 basic revenue streams programmed into the financing plan. The first is property taxes, as we've mentioned. So we have our 50 mils for debt service. We have in the financing plan, although there's not a limit on the operations levy, the model in the financing plan is run at a 10 mil operating and maintenance levy. There's only a tax liability for those properties that are within the boundaries of the metro districts. There is no tax liability for any other properties within Idaho Springs. So this is an opportunity for this development to pay its own way with respect to the public infrastructure that's required to build it out. Another form of revenue that's available in this context are specific ownership taxes. These are a share of the vehicle registration fees that are collected in the county. Every taxing jurisdiction in the county gets to share in the total amount of vehicle registration fees that are produced by sales within the county. And the share is based on your relative tax receipts by jurisdiction. So there's no new tax involved here on the part of the metro districts. They simply get to take a slice of the existing tax revenue that's out there. And then finally, we have something called PIF revenues. This is short for public improvement fee revenues. So public improvement fees are produced by a covenant that is recorded by the developer against property within the districts as a private transaction that makes that property subject to certain transaction fees when they occur within the boundaries that are covered by the covenant. So we have, in this case, a 1% add-on sales tax, and actually this lodging fee is not 1%. I believe it's on the order of 6%. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong there. In any event, we for each retail sales transaction that occurs within the boundaries of the districts, that vendor would be required to collect, in addition to the regular sales tax, would collect an additional 1% add-on fee as part of that transaction. And that revenue would then be available to help fund the bonds that are issued for the project or for other improvements within the project. But as presently modeled, they're part of the bond issue structure. Same thing for the lodging PIF, to the extent that there are hotel rooms that are transacted, that then there would be a lodging fee that would also come to the benefit of the Metro District. So those are your three revenue sources that are reflected in the financing plan that's attached to the service plan. Also reflected in the financing plan are some bond issue proposals. We've modeled an initial bond issue to occur in 2021 with projected bond proceeds of approximately $18 million. We also modeled a second bond issuance 10 years out in 2031, where we would propose to refinance the bonds that are issued initially. Once we have more development, it's usually an opportunity to refinance bonds that are issued on an early stage to achieve a lower interest rate and long-term financing to benefit from that. It also projected additional bond proceeds, should they be needed, in the amount of about $8 million. So the upshot of all that is that the financing plan demonstrates that, given the assumptions that are included in there regarding development and the resulting assessed value and resulting property taxes and fees that are collected, that the Metro districts would have the ability to discharge the debt as proposed. Again, the limit is more driven by the 50 mil cap than these particular numbers, because that really serves to limit the amount of debt that the market will accept. In terms of the market, as we talked about during the work session, these initial bonds would be marketed to sophisticated investors. They would be institutions that are familiar with Metro District bond issues. They would be used to the 50 mil cap. They know that they take the risk that the 50 mils will produce a certain amount of revenue. And if for some reason the development lags and therefore the revenues are not initially there, then the bondholders take the risk of those revenues coming in more slowly, not the property taxpayers. So we have, in addition to the mill cap, we've got a set of sophisticated investors that know what they're getting into when it comes to investing in these types of bonds. So we have presented and worked with Carmen in regard to a resolution which would be approved, or which would approve the service plan. That resolution is necessary under state law to enable us to then go to the district court to petition the district court to hold an election of the taxpayers, electors within the boundaries of the Metro districts. And it would not require an election within the general electorate of Idaho Springs. So again, consistent with the notion that this area will pay its own way in the form of property taxes, it's the property tax payers that get to vote at this election. That election, we have to show the court that we followed the Colorado Election Code and all of its particulars. And we will present that petition for organization to the district court, request that it oversee the election. We will then conduct the election, tally the results, and then return to the district court with the results of the election and demonstrate to the court that the election was passed. And if the court is so persuaded, it will then issue an order and decree creating the Metro District. Once the Metro District is created, it's a public entity, just as the city council is, or just as the city is. We're subject to all of the disclosure requirements that are typically applicable to public entities in Colorado. So we have to have public meetings with notice. All of the records of the Metro District are public and can be discovered by any member of the public, whether or not they're operating within the district. We are subject to annual budgeting requirements, public hearings on the budget, just as you are. We're subject to annual auditing requirements, just as the city is. And there are a host of other public disclosures that are unique to Metro districts that are designed to make the public generally aware of not only the existence of the Metro District, but its financial powers, the amount of debt that it has outstanding, so as to ensure that there's a fully transparent decision-making process and activities on the part of the Metro districts. I think that I will pause at that point. That's the conclusion of the PowerPoint, and we would be happy to answer any questions about any aspect of the PowerPoint or the service plan or any element relating to Metro districts in general that you might have.
Bill, I have a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you're trying to sell the district as, you know, lots and lots of these are going on in Colorado all the time, but so only the stakeholders are involved in the district. Is that correct?
That is
nobody
correct.
From the outside.
That is correct. In terms of financial liability and the obligation to pay taxes, yes.
Well, in terms of anything, really. I mean, nobody else can be involved in this, yes, no?
Well, any member of the public can appear at any meeting, any public meeting of the board of directors of the Metro districts, just as they can at the city council, and they can be, they have the right to appear and to make public comment.
But they have no say in what happens.
No, they don't. If they're not within the if they don't have property within the boundaries of the Metro districts, then no, they don't have a decision-making authority with regard to district activities.
So basically, this is a tool that is used for finance, but so tentatively, you have an X amount already levied against buildings or structures or businesses that aren't even there yet, correct?
That is correct.
Did you say the public improvement fee is 6% or 7% or 1%?
So the fee for retail sales transactions is 1% of each sales transaction. So if someone sells sells a T-shirt or a souvenir or some other item to which sales tax is typically applied, then there would be an additional 1% fee that they pay. So anybody coming from outside of Idaho Springs who comes in as a tourist to visit the site, they would pay an additional 1% fee. Anybody who purchases within a retailer within the boundaries of the district would pay the extra fee.
But I thought only the leaseholders you said were to pay it back.
There's three sources of revenue. So we have property taxes, which are paid by the property owner within the boundaries of the district, and to the extent that property owner then leases to retailers property, that also passes through the tax liability, then those retailers will pay the tax liability as part of their lease payment, which will be fully disclosed. But then patrons that come to that retailer and purchase from that retailer will also pay the 1% public improvement fee, which would also go towards funding district bonds.
With a 40-year cap back to revenues shared from the date this is all implicated back to the investors.
Yes, the investors would buy their investment pursuant to a disclosure document called a limited offering memorandum, or a official statement. Sometimes it's called a prospectus is another term that's sometimes used. And so that prospectus will describe the project. It will describe the revenue sources that are pledged to the payment of the bonds. So it will describe the tax liability that the district has agreed to incur. It will also describe to those investors the fact that there would be a public improvement fee that would also go towards payment of the bonds. So there's a fully disclosed, risk assessment that they can make at that point.
A risk assessment or a payday for 40 years? I'm sorry.
Well, every investor will make their own risk assessment. And typically the bonds will be issued with a certain term. And while there's a 40-year limit on that, most bonds, frankly, are issued with something closer to a 35-year term. But there will be a term of those bonds that will be part of the issue. And the bondholders will understand that those bonds will be paid off during that period, during that term, from the revenues of the property taxes and the PIF.
Can I just interrupt for a second and use the Union Station example in Denver? Union Station, a commercial endeavor, a historic endeavor, with all of these leasehold rental properties, etc., but no private residences in Union Station, needed a metro district to fund their public improvements so they could actually make the numbers work. It doesn't affect the residential property owner next door. Basically, we're taxing ourselves at this point.
Mary Jane, I totally agree with that. Yes, you're correct. But if you build into something where you're leasing a retail business to the next person, then it's not you, it's them.
Well, and they're fully aware of that. If they want to be a retail business in our district, they understand that fee is part of their responsibility, and it passes on. If you've ever looked at a bill at Union Station or some of these other Larimer Square or any place that tax on a
totally
fee. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Belmar is the exact same way, which is why I don't go there anymore. But my point is that pretty soon, do you not tax yourself out of, well, nobody can afford to be there anymore, no matter who's paying the bill, whether it's your patrons or whether it's the people, the lessees.
We're using this as a potential option, Jimmy, to see if we need to do it or not.
Well, I think, Jimmy, the other point too is that, as I said earlier, the project has got these extraordinary costs. To build the village, which will house these tenants that we're talking about, we'd have to move about 20,000 yards of that waste rock, right? And so absent this financial resource, the project would not pencil. You wouldn't get the return on cost necessary for anybody to finance the project. So it's kind of a but-for argument. I think another good example of a recent project you probably are familiar with is the Gateway project in Morrison, where the Origins Red Rocks Hotel is, and there's the Harley Davidson dealership there. Got a similar size retail as what we are proposing at some point. As Mary Jane said, we fully disclose all these tax structures and the fees. We're obligated to do that, to disclose to these tenants what we project the increased taxes would be with these mill levies. And they sign the leases with that full knowledge. So I think, it's just a business structure that's a project that we're not trying to hide anything here at all. It's fully disclosed.
No, I'm not accusing you of hiding anything at all. All I'm simply asking that is the project too large that you can't afford to do it, or and hence the reason for all this. I totally understand all the taxes and everything else, but pretty soon at 10+% on a meal or a dine-in or a night stay somewhere, and you're exactly right, Brian. I know a lot of people that don't buy Harleys at Avalanche Harley because of that.
It's not 10%, Jimmy. It's 1%. 1%.
We're already at 8.5.
Stays 1% for the term. For the bond.
I know. I can do simple math, and pretty soon we're nearing 10.
I don't know how you got to 10.
Well, we have 8.5% sales tax. If you add 1% onto that, it's 9.5.
Add on, okay, with the Idaho Springs taxes. I see. I thought you meant the PIF was 10%.
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is that every project that proposes a metro district like this that has the prospect of property taxes and public improvement fees, every sponsor proponent of that project has to go through an internal fiscal analysis of the economics of that, and whether the property tax load and the public improvement fee load is too much for the project to bear. Every project has its own internal, economics to evaluate. What is clear from the fact that this is being proposed to you in the form it is today is that the development group has made that internal assessment and has determined that this is not an unreasonable load that would affect the viability of the project. I would also say, though, to the extent that it's helpful, when you cast a wider net and look at other commercial projects in the metro area and areas that are close to Idaho Springs, having a commercial district with a 50 mil cap and this type of public improvement fee is very common. And while every project is different and every impact can be different, in terms of the state of the art in the industry, we're not outside of what other commercial retailers have seen in other projects. And so those two factors, I think, are ones that can help to make folks feel comfortable that we're not proposing something that's out of the ordinary or extreme, and that there are lots of other commercial projects where we have retailers that have not had an issue with this type of structure. So obviously there has to be disclosure. Obviously everybody's got to make their own decision. Every retailer's got to make their own decision about whether to sign the lease, but that will certainly not occur without full disclosure.
So when I boil this down to a nutshell, I mean, just the way I'm viewing this, if I sign a triple net lease, these are disclosed to me up front. And ultimately, it would seem that those who could lose would be a leasee and ultimately investors in the venture, but in no way the city.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So another way that we need to look at this is the only risk takers here is the Argo property. There's no risk to any of the residents in the city, any of the business owners of the city, or the city itself. This is just a taxing entity for a certain area. So there's no risk to the rest of the city. None of this, if people don't, if the project leases out space for retail, and they don't bring in enough business because of that extra 1%, that's nothing on the city. That's totally on the developers of the project and who they're leasing out to.
Well, the developers are at risk, but also there's bondholders, and there bondholders that are at risk too.
Yes, the bondholders, the investors take the risk that the property tax revenue won't be sufficient to pay the bonds. That's the purpose of the 50 mil cap.
So
Well,
I'm not, go ahead.
It's also the case that maybe initially the bonds are floated at 6.25. I know it says something less, but maybe initially they're floated at say 6 or 6.25, but then you have an option later on to refinance at a lower rate because the project has a track record.
Right. That's correct.
So have you received a bond rating yet? Or you might not have to disclose that. I'm not sure.
No, there's no rating. These bonds, when they're initially issued, really all Metro District bonds, when they are issued in an early stage of development, they won't have a rating. It'll have to wait until the project develops and you show some critical mass to the rating agencies. Eventually, they could acquire a rating, but not initially.
So if I'm not mistaken, if you get the bond investors involved, you raise the capital to do this project, the project's more than likely going to get done. It's at that point whether or not these leases can support it after the project is completed, right?
Yeah, as part of the disclosure document that every investor will read, there will be a description in there of the status of development. What has broken ground? What leases have been signed? What letters of intent have been issued? All of that will be discussed. And there's a certain critical mass of activity that needs to be reached. It varies from project to project before the investors will be attracted to buy the bonds. But obviously, all of the development, the better you are in terms of the story you can tell to your investors, the more likelihood it is that they will actually agree to buy the bonds.
I have a couple of questions, if I may, Mayor.
Sure, go right ahead, Art.
Okay, and I'm probably going to jump around a little bit, but it says property taxes 50 mils for debt service. It says 10 mils for operations and maintenance. Who pays? Where are you getting the 10 mils from for that portion of the operation and maintenance? Where's that coming from?
Comes from taxable property within the boundaries of the districts. It's the
So
same
actually, if I buy a house there, I'm going to be responsible for 60 mils?
Yeah, except we're not presently proposing residential development. This is a commercial development.
I understand that, but you do mention residential on here, so that's where I'm going with it. Okay, so it will come to that. And so the residents will be responsible if they buy a home and you give them full disclosure, like you say, we're talking 60 mils for their property taxes.
That would be correct under that scenario.
Okay.
Art, point of clarification. Any residential that we might do, and we certainly are not planning on it right now, would most likely be multifamily, or it would be for lease, for rent, not, you wouldn't have property owners out there.
Well, we don't know that. I mean, I've heard about townhouses and condominiums as well. So I'm going to go under that premise, if I may, because it's just where I'm going with it. Also, it says on the other page, maximum debt levy 50 mils subject for adjustment. What's that mean?
So when you have residential development, if we ever do, then what the statute says is that, or what the service plan says, is that the mill levy cap is 50 mils, right, what we call Gallagherized. So we have the Gallagher Amendment that changes the ratio of assessed value for residential property relative to market value. So for example, at present, if you have a house that has a certain market value, the taxable value of that house is 7.15% of the market value.
Okay.
All right. And then against that, you apply the mill levy to produce the property taxes that then is used to pay any bonds that are subject to that commitment. What happens under the Gallagher Amendment is that ratio, that 7.15% of market value, that can change. And that, in fact, it has been going down over the past several years. At one point, it was 7.95%, and now it's dropped down to 7.15%, and it may drop further. what the adjustment refers to is if that ratio should drop below what it is today,
right?
Then to preserve equality within the boundaries of the districts, to preserve the same revenue that would otherwise have been produced at a year when it was at 7.15%, but now suddenly it's at, let's say, 6.9%. If you levy the same 50 mills, you're going to produce less revenue at 6.9% than you are at 7.1%. So what the Gallagher adjustment reference is meant to do is to say, well, if that should happen, if we would have a reduction in the assessed value ratio that would reduce at that 50 mil cap the amount of revenue we would get, then we get to raise that mill levy by an amount that would bring us back to equality, back to status quo with respect to where we were. So that's what that refers to.
So technically, in the long run, there's a possibility that besides the 60 mills that a resident might pay for a home that they purchased there, it can go up to 65 mills or 70 mills, whatever the market dictates according to your formula.
Correct. Although, again, it's important to understand there's no tax increase there. It's the same amount of taxes that's being collected. The only thing, it just takes a little higher mill levy to collect the same amount of revenue when that assessed ratio has gone down. All right, so there's no tax increase. Same tax, same amount of taxes being collected. All you're trying to do is stay even with where you were.
So what would happen if for some reason it would decline based on economy and market values and all that other stuff? 3 years later, it starts to go back up. Do you adjust the mills back down then, or do you leave the mills where they are and collect that additional property tax?
Well, I've never seen it go back up.
We haven't seen a lot of things in this country, but
yeah,
they're changing.
Technically, I think there would have to be I've never seen that happen,
Okay.
but it's an up and down adjustment, okay, to maintain the equality.
To take the equality. Okay. All right. And then one other question, well, two other questions, maybe three, I'm not sure. You mentioned that you share in the license fee taxes on the license plates.
Right.
And there's no increase because you're sharing in it. Is that, did I quote you quite close to what you said?
You can quote me on that, yes.
Okay. So if all of these special districts have the opportunity to share in that amount of money, isn't it logical that the state or county somewhere has to raise those rates, that percentage on there, so they're getting their share of the license fees as well as the share that they're sharing with the municipalities or the districts, the tax districts? I mean, somewhere along the line, because you say you're seeing all these districts popping up all over the place, somewhere along the line, that has to increase to keep the county and the state whole as well. So by them sharing that amount of money with more districts, isn't that one trigger to raise that for the people who are paying on the license plates?
I suppose theoretically, but that would have to be a state legislative change. And there has not been one, despite the fact that there's over 2,000 metro districts or special districts in the state that have, arisen over the course of time. So, that would have to be a state legislative initiated change.
Okay, but it is theoretically possible, I guess. And the other gentleman talked about all the rock and dirt and all that stuff that you folks are going to be moving. Is the EPA involved in that at all to watch to see if there's any contaminants in the soil?
Yeah.
Has that already been addressed?
They sure are. That's a great question, Art. Thank you. So we submitted our materials management plan to CDPHE EPA about a month ago that contemplates this work. And you're exactly right. They have full jurisdiction over anything you do on the site. We've got rules of engagement in place and remedies that we have to maintain to make sure that we don't get sideways with the state and the feds.
And I just want to add one thing. I'm sorry, I'm in the dark. That's why I turned off my video. But the EPA and the CDPHE really are watching this project closely and are looking forward to a really great example of adaptive reuse of a Superfund site. So believe me, their eyes are on everything Argo.
And by the way, that's the first time or the last time you'll ever hear Mary Jane say I'm in the dark.
I'm sitting on my deck in the dark. It's too beautiful out.
And one other question, and you may have addressed it and I missed it, in referring to fees to be imposed. Are those fees that can be imposed on the commercial and also on residential areas for the homeowners?
Yeah, fees can be imposed by metro districts for any public service or facility that they are providing. So to the extent that there is a property owner that benefits from improvements that are being made by the metro district, a fee can be imposed to help defray the cost of those facilities or those services. So yes, it could apply to commercial or residential.
Would that fee be generated by the regular property tax bill? Would it be included in there, or would it be separate from the district?
That's a good question. It's a separate fee. There would obviously be a board meeting at which public notice would be given of the fact that a fee was being considered. And if it were adopted, then there would have to be notice to the payors of that fee as to the amount of the fee and when it's due, and then a typical collection, when it's due, they have to pay it. If they don't pay it, then there's a collection ability.
Okay, and this is probably a question that's hypothetical right now, but do you see if the residential phase of this project is developed, do you see them having to have an HOA as well? I mean, is that a practice in these type of districts on the residential end of it?
In a master plan community, sure, but that's not what we're doing here. As I said earlier, this is in all likelihood are going to be multifamily renters and not homeowners.
That troubles me, but okay, high in density, there we go. Okay, I think I'm done, gentlemen. I hope I made sense. I appreciate your answers, and Mary Jane, you as well.
Questions? Still going on questions to the applicants. Any other council members?
I have a question about the boundary. So this boundary of this district includes the residential area, what's on the table this evening?
It does.
And the regulations that are going to be set forth for that residential area, is that something that comes before council at that time? Like you're proposing for the commercial right now?
Clarify that for me, Scott.
Well, you're proposing how the district's going to be run for the commercial area right now, I believe. But what about the residential area? Is that spelled out?
They're the same financial constraints. So the 50 mil cap is probably, again, I keep hitting that point. It's probably the most important element if you're talking about a residential district. You've got to have a mill levy cap for debt service. And if you look around the state and up and down the Front Range and beyond into the mountains, if you see any residential project, you're always going to see a mill levy cap. And 50 mils is by far and away the most common mill levy cap that there is. And that's intended to prevent what happened in the late 80s, early 90s, which was bonds being issued without mill levy caps, development not occurring, and then the mill levy going through the roof. So this 50 mil cap is the single most important thing that has happened to residential developments in the last 25 years.
But the residential is more of a stage 2. I understand that the commercial part of this is the primary focus right now. Is that true, Mary Jane?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is not going to make or break the gondola portion, but it will make or break the mixed use development, the hotel and the retail type stuff. So, and Brian, you can, hit me later, but we definitely need this funding, but it doesn't break the gondola project.
I do have one other question. You're talking about apartments. Is that property already zoned that could occur? Or because it's a district, you can zone it yourself that way
It's already zoned, Art.
for high density buildings? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by high density. I think we're zoned.
Apartment buildings.
We're zoned for, I think, a maximum of 200 residential units, Art.
On the entire site.
But you can build an apartment building and depending on the restrictions of the construction, you can put 100 apartments in there and you're telling me that's 100, you're counting that as 100 residential
I think,
homes.
yeah,
Let's say.
the PD allows us or entitles us to build up to 200 residential units. The practical, ability for us to do that is highly unlikely, given the site, the terrain, and the environmental issues. But that was approved in the PD. And we would have to come before you with another FDP, of course, for the multifamily or residential down the road at some point. We're not even thinking about resi right now. We're focused on the gondola and then on this next phase on the commercial village Mary Jane mentioned with the hotel.
No, I understand that it's a big, big development that you're looking at, but it's a residential on the literature. So I thought it was a good time to bring it up. Okay, thank you once again.
All right, any more questions, council? Okay, with that, we still have opportunity for public comments. Do we have anybody from the public, John or Diane, or anybody that's on our call with us that would like to make comments?
We do not.
All right, thanks, John. Okay, it is 8:24. We will go back in with council discussion. Any other discussion amongst council before we
Sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead, Carmen.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm on a little bit of a lag. I just wanted to make sure if all your questions are answered and council is short of that, you just need to close the hearing and note the time that you do that, Mayor.
Okay. Okay, with no more questions, it's 8:25. This hearing is now closed. And now we can have discussion with council again. Any other questions, council?
Is this either a pass or fail this evening? Is there any other readings? Is this one resolution or?
Just one resolution. This will give them the authority to go to the district court and have an election.
Correct.
Okay, with nothing else, do I have a motion?
I would move to approve resolution number 22, series 2020, a resolution approving the service plan for Mighty Argo Metropolitan District numbers 1 through 3.
Do I have a second?
Second.
That was John Curtis, second.
Yes.
Thanks, John. All right, last chance for discussion. Can I have roll call, please?
Michael Hillman,
Yes.
Scott Pennell,
Yes.
Chuck Harmon,
Yes.
Bob Boland. Sorry, John Curtis,
Yes.
Art Cacavelli,
No.
Jim Clark.
No.
All right, 4-2, motion passes. All right, let's move on. Let's get Bob back in on the meeting. Jan, you hide Bob somewhere?
Thank you, council. Good night.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, Bob back in. There he is. All right, let's move on. We'll move down to City Administrator. Andy, what do you have for us?
Mayor and council, you have my report with no request for action this evening.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Andy? We should be drilling him. He took a week off from us and we should have all kinds of questions to drill him with. All right, thanks, Andy. Keep up the good work. We will move to City Clerk, Diane.
Mayor and council, I have one request for action from you tonight.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Diane? Can I have a motion?
I'll move
I would
to,
move to authorize. Go ahead, Scott.
I'll move to authorize the city clerk to sign the IGA with the Clear Creek County for the 2020 general election.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Motion and a second. That was Art on the second. Discussion? Roll call.
Michael Hillman,
Yes.
Scott Pennell,
Yes.
Chuck Harmon,
Yes.
Bob Boland,
Yes.
John Curtis,
Yes.
Art Cacavelli,
Yes.
Jim Clark.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Diane. Keep up the good work. We'll move down
Thank
to the PD. Chief. Another person that was on vacation for a week. You're on mute, Chief. Chief, you're on mute. You're still on mute. There you
All
go.
right, there we are. Mayor and Council, I, of course, was gone last Thursday, but I did email each of you an updated report through yesterday. So I have no request for action, and that report was sent to your emails.
All right, thanks, Chief. Anybody have any questions for Chief? All right. Last but not least is John with Public Works and Water and Wastewater.
Mayor and Council, you should have my staff report in your packet with no request for action.
All right. Any questions for John? I don't have a question, but a statement. But it's nice to see that Project 1 is ready to go, and they're already starting to kind of dive in to make a way for Project 2.
It's just a few minor things on Project 1 and starting to install a lot of the material and equipment from Project 2.
Okay. Any last chance for questions for John?
Can we come down and tour the wastewater plant tonight?
Tonight?
Okay.
Did you say tonight, John?
If you have a flashlight.
Tonight.
All right. Well, council, good meeting. I think that's it. I don't have any reports to share. Do we have any committee reports? All right. With that, we will adjourn this meeting at 8:30. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night. Good night. Pleasant dreams.